Welcome to the Keys to Therapy. I'm Samantha Newton, a licensed therapist, and today I'm going to be talking about group therapy. Now, group therapy can be really intimidating for a lot of therapists because one, it's a lot of work sometimes, and two, you're outnumbered. You are potentially in a room of 8 people, 10 people, 12 people, and it's typically just you. Even if there is a co-facilitator, there's still 2 of you and a lot more of the clients. So I know some therapists, especially if you're newer in your career, you can find that a little scarier because then it's more people looking at you, waiting for you to share, waiting for you to direct the group, and that can be kind of scary, honestly. I think group dynamics at times can also be a little bit trickier too. I think that's why some people like me tend to steer away from like couples therapy or even sometimes like family therapy because there's just a lot that's going on in the room, and that could be tougher to manage as a therapist, even as just a person, with some of the energy that can come through those sessions. So I think it's really helpful for us to kind of talk through what group therapy can look like, what it can be like, and so that way hopefully you guys out there won't be so nervous to do it. So a little bit of background on my experience with groups. I've done groups most of my career in different settings. I think a lot of times, especially when you're newer, they'll throw therapists into groups and hope that you swim and not drown. But I think it can be a really good experience because you get to deal with a lot of different personalities and you kind of get more comfortable being in charge too. So I know the first groups I did, I took a year off between my bachelor's and my master's, and I worked at a residential facility for people who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had all committed crimes. So given like the level of a lot of the clients were struggling with, even on medication, they were still struggling with being like very present. Some of them were still experiencing like heavy symptoms. So most of the groups were psychoeducational. They weren't necessarily therapeutic in a way that other groups are that I'll talk about later. But so my first experience was with this population, which is a lot already. Talk about intimidating. And it was in groups. So every day, Monday through Friday, for hours, each therapist there, therapists, we all had our bachelors, but counselor, whatever, I can't remember what they called us, but we each had our own group and a section of the building, whether it was a table in the dining room, somewhere in the main living area, we all had our group. So it typically would range from like 8 to 10 people. Every couple months they would switch who was in the groups, so then that way everybody got to experience, like the clients got to experience different facilitators, and we got to experience, and build relationships with different clients and keep the dynamics new. So I was doing that. So I would have to come up with the group topics every day. I had to figure out what we were going to talk about, how it was going to run, and really try to engage the group. So I would typically, in the beginning of the week, look up some different topics, usually stuff like self-care, having a good bedtime routine, having a good morning routine, what their medications would do. We'd look a lot about, at maybe what some of the medications were that they were taking and discuss why they were on it. So this one is for schizophrenia. Let's discuss what that is. And, people could share their experiences with that diagnosis. So kind of easy topics for the most part, but you have to really engage the group. You're doing groups at 8 or 9 in the morning, and most of the people there, because it was mostly residential, but there was like an outpatient side of it, but they lived there. They just literally rolled out of bed and went to group. So having that energy as the group leader was a big deal. Being like, all right guys, let's go, without being too annoying, but to be like, all right, come on, like wake up, get your coffee, let's get moving here. So just kind of be aware of like what time of day it is and who you're dealing with. So like at a hospital too, for example, sometimes depending on what time your group is, they may have just woken up too. Or they may have been woken up multiple times in the middle of the night, depending on what they're there for and how the staff operates. So just kind of be mindful of that. You may need to come in with a little bit more energy to hopefully like feed some of that to them. So I did groups there. And then at I did an internship at a psych hospital. So I did process groups there every day. I was there Monday through Wednesday for almost a year. So I did process groups there. Now, process groups ran very differently. And this was an open group because in a hospital, people are kind of constantly in and out. So, you know, there was a lot of things with that group that you would have to be prepared for. I wouldn't always know Monday morning who came in over the weekend and what was going on with them. I wouldn't always know everybody who was in there. Most of the time, I wouldn't know half of them. Every new person that comes in completely shifts the dynamic of the room. And some people are more willing to be there than others. So there's a lot of considerations to take as you're prepping the group, you're planning for what you're going to talk about. Like I said, typically with process groups, you have to be pretty good at thinking up stuff on the spot, which I feel like overall therapists, we kind of have to be, right? Because we often don't have a lesson plan for individual sessions. Luckily, you can for most group sessions, but in process groups, you don't. So when you're in a process group, just kind of be aware of, try to gather as much information as you can about everybody that's there, but just sort of be aware of like each person's dynamics and how they're feeling, how they're rubbing off on some of the other people. And we'll get to some of the ins and outs of that too. So I did a group there, and then after I graduated my first job in community mental health, where I was working to get my hours for my license, I did a teen substance abuse group 3 evenings a week. I didn't do it consistently. A few of us were trained in it, and we would sort of rotate because the group went until like 9 at night. I think it was like 6 to 9. So, 6 to 9, 6 to 8, something like that. So we would kind of rotate, but I would do that too. So with that group, that was kind of like a process group too. It ran through this program called the 7 Challenges. And so all of the teens there had been in some sort of trouble for having some sort of substance on them or in their system. And so they were sent to this group, and it was an IOP group. So intensive outpatient, meaning we met like 3 times a week for a couple hours each time. And that was also a process group. So same thing. A lot of those people, or a lot of the teens, didn't really want to be there. That was a punishment for them to have to come to the group. So as a facilitator, it's a little bit tougher if people aren't necessarily choosing to be there. So be mindful of that too, and try not to take some of it personally. Sometimes people are very hostile in a forced group situation, and it may take them a little bit more time to warm up if they ever do. So, and a lot of them do, but just kind of know it's really tough, especially as you're starting out, to not take it personally. But you'll learn over time, like, they're not upset at you. They're upset at the system, or possibly even upset at themselves for being in this position to begin with. And so I did that. And then I also did a partial hospitalization group there every morning for probably about a year and a half, I think. It was my program with someone else. But I would spend the first half of the day, like the first 3 or 4 hours of each day, and be with my group. So that was an open group too. People would tend to be there for, say, I think it was like 12 weeks, but people would constantly be in and out, and we were kind of on like the inpatient side of the building. And there were some people who were dual diagnosis on the substance abuse side that also had mental health issues. So they would sometimes come into the group. So there could be people who were in the group just for the day, and there was people in there for the whole 12 weeks. And with the partial hospitalization group, I had a lesson plan. So it was written out. Here's Monday through Friday, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and each topic. So that could range from psychoeducational to a little bit more of a process group to an art project to a movie day. And there was a lot of different things in there, which I liked. And I think that the clients liked for the most part too. And some variety. It's not the same thing every day. And I really enjoyed that group. And that was very helpful for me to have that structure, because then that meant every 12 weeks, like after I did the initial planning for every topic and got all my stuff together, I could just recycle it. So if you're going to do a long-term group, especially if it's geared towards a specific topic, I would highly recommend that you have a lesson plan, and then you can just recycle it for the next time, and it's less work. And I think that'll be really helpful for you. And it also helps you later on if you're like marketing a specific group, because you'll know all the things that are included in it, and then hopefully have some feedback on those topics as well. And then after that, I think that was kind of it for me with groups. I think after that I primarily did individual. I sat in on a few groups when I worked on base, with the Navy, but I didn't really lead any groups after that. So the need was a lot higher for individual therapy. So that's primarily what I have done since. So something else I would say is that, groups can be really beneficial for clients. And I think it's really nice that you can sometimes create a community within the group. I know in my partial hospitalization group, and actually in the substance abuse group too, because they were there for longer periods of time, that some of the clients really became close. Like some of them became friends. Some of them would, kind of hold each other accountable in between groups. And they would check in with each other. And once that group camaraderie started happening, it was really nice on my end to run the group, because they would be comfortable enough to call each other out, but in a nice way, so like, hey, I thought 2 weeks ago you said you were going to talk to your son about that, and you just said he's still doing the same behavior. Did you talk to him? And I wouldn't even need to call people that. They'd be doing it for me. So it's kind of cool when they've developed those types of relationships. Now you'll have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes romantic relationships between clients can evolve, and you can't control that or do anything about that. But you just want to make sure that you're aware that the dynamics can spread in different ways. Sometimes people can become enemies within the group, and then you have to figure out how to handle that. But for the most part, groups like that can create a sense of community, and it gives validation to the clients that other people are going through the same thing that they are. And it can provide comfort for them to be around people who directly relate to them. So there's a ton of benefits of group therapy. So if you can get through, if you have any, some of the anxieties of maybe being outnumbered, having fears of losing control over the group and stuff like that, you can really, really hone your skills as a therapist, and you can see some really great results from some of the clients. So now the action steps. So tips for running groups. The first tip I would have would be, I kind of hinted at it earlier, like make a lesson plan or agenda. Even if you're doing a process group, have a basic outline for what the group looks like. So if somebody's in that inpatient unit with you all week, they'll already come into the group knowing like the top 3 things you guys are going to cover and what you're going to talk about. So if it's a group that's geared towards a specific population, or if it's a group for a specific issue or diagnosis, then have a clear topic, have clear lesson plans, and some bullet points of things that you want to cover. And that will help you stay on track. Because sometimes you'll be in the middle of a group and somebody's going on a tangent, everybody else is on the tangent, you may even be on the tangent, and then it's like, whoa, wait, we've been talking about this random thing for the last 10 minutes, like, let's reel it back in. But if you don't have some of those bullet points and some of that lesson plan written out already, it's going to be a little bit tougher to pull everybody back and even pull yourself back. Plus, if you want to look more prepared, possibly even just look, hopefully eventually feel more confident, it looks great that you came to the group prepared, especially if you're asking clients to. If it's the type of group where they've got to participate, which is pretty much all of them, they're going to have something they need to share, maybe a little bit more is on them if it's a process group, then you want to come in like, hey, I did my homework too. I'm not asking you guys to do anything I didn't do. So have a clear objective and agenda. This next one is probably the biggest thing that you can do. If nothing else, do this one. And that is create group rules and share them with the group. Now, I know some of that may feel very like kindergarten. Please stay in your seat. Raise your hand if you have a question, stuff like that. But trust me when I say that adults sometimes need those reminders more than anybody else. I have found that groups with adults were a lot harder at times to rein in than the ones I did with teens. Because teens are still in school. For the most part, they're used to having to do certain things like ask to go to the bathroom or, raise their hand to share, whatever else. Adults don't. And sometimes adults are maybe even like a little bit more entitled, right? Because they're like, I'm 30, I'm 50, I'm whatever. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. Especially if you're newer in the field and you're younger. That can also create some intimidation and imposter syndrome for you. But if you come in really assertive, kind, but assertive, and tell everyone what the group rules are. If you're in a position where you're doing the group in person, and depending on like how old or young the group is, I think if they're younger, especially, it's better to have the rules posted somewhere. If this is going to be something that you're doing consistently, again, feels kindergarten, but I swear it's helpful. Have the rules posted somewhere. In the very first session, go over the rules. That's what you need to spend the first like 5, 10, 15 minutes on. If it's an open group, spend every group for the first few minutes going over the rules, because you're going to have people who are brand new to the group. So I think if you don't establish the rules, you're not establishing the boundaries. And everybody needs those, especially if they're new to the group. They're new to you. You're new to it. Like, you want to make sure that you have all of that lined up and that they understand what the expectations are. So nobody's surprised if there's consequences later. So you might want to have rules like, be respectful of everybody. Don't interrupt one another. If you have to get up to get water or go to the bathroom, just quietly do so. You, don't curse in the group if that's something that you want to instill. Be aware that might not work for everybody. So, but yeah, just kind of have whatever rules are going to help you feel comfortable, and the population that you're working with feel comfortable too. So maybe it's like, let's not talk about politics or religion in this group because those are heated things and we're not here for that. So let's discuss this issue. We're all here for grief, so let's not discuss, I don't know, the political climate right now or whatever it is. If you're in person, not bringing weapons, not having anything that can harm somebody else, not harming anybody else or putting hands on them, so have like it doesn't even matter if that sounds like well, duh, why would they do that? Trust me, somebody will. So I have been in many groups, especially inpatient, where people weren't there necessarily to get better. They were forced to be there. Or I can think of one person in particular in an inpatient group. The whole reason he was there really was to kind of like incite violence amongst the rest of the people. So he would purposely in group say things that he knew would upset people, like about harming children and stuff like that, just to get a rise out of everybody and get that negative attention. So understand like what your rules are also going to be. Like, here's the rules, and just like you would with boundaries, right? You can't have boundaries without what the consequences are going to be. Here's all the group rules. If you don't follow them, here's what will happen. You will be kicked out of this group. Your money will not be refunded. You cannot come back to the group. Your probation officer will be aware of what happened. Whatever the group is, whatever the situation is. And you don't have to sound like when you're going over these things. You can be like, hey guys, I want this to be safe for everybody. I want everyone to really get the most out of this group. So how do we do that? We don't talk crap about each other. We don't let things that we say in the room leave the room. So, having those specific rules, and you can present them in that way or whatever your style is. But just make sure that you are being assertive. You're making the eye contact with everybody in the group. You may even, and I would honestly prefer this too, have them written and sign them. Almost like you would with a consent form for the group. Have a group rules form that they sign, that they're acknowledging what the consequences are. Especially if it's something with money, right? So if it's like, you won't get a refund if you violate the rules and now you get kicked out. And then they can't come back at you for that stuff. So just kind of, again, protect yourself on all levels, but you're protecting the group members too. And I know I'm making it sound a little bit scary, and I don't want it to, but you want to be prepared for all things, right? Sometimes, I'll tell clients, if you're already thinking of worst case scenario, okay, think it through a little bit further and plan for how to handle it. Hopefully it never happens, but if it does, you're ready. And I want the same thing for you guys. I want you to plan for what may be worst case scenario. Give it a minute, have like your safety plan ready, and then pull back and be like, all right, but what if it goes well? And how will that look? And focus more on that end of it. Like, why are you doing this group? And maybe it's because your boss told you have to. But then if that's the case, then what can I get out of this group? And build from there. The next thing I would do is at the start of every group, write down everyone's names. That's really helpful. Have everybody go around and do an introduction. Whether it's like, hey, I'm so-and-so, and here's my goal for the day. I'm so-and-so, and here's why I'm in the group. Maybe it's just their names, but write them down because, well, for a few reasons. One is if they're new to you, or it's an open group and there's constantly new people, you're not going to remember every single person's name. Not every day. So, and usually if you're in like a hospital or somewhere like that, that it is an open group and people are constantly changing, right when you think you got everyone's names down, somebody leaves and like 3 new people come in and you gotta start all over. So write down their names. Also, for documentation purposes, later when you're doing your notes for the groups, you're going to want to know what each person said and did and have at least like a highlight or two so that you can document that. Hey, they shared this about, this family stressor and discussed how they plan on handling it. So I would have, whether it's an attendance sheet that they all sign and then you're holding on to and you can take little notes on. I know when I worked at the hospital, I would just have a blank sheet of paper. And as everyone checked in, I'd write down their names. And then, like I said, a bullet point or two, or even just a word like family, medication. So it would jog my memory later, typically hours later, when I was able to do my notes. So plus, when you're looking around the room and you really want to address somebody, it's nice to have that personal touch. And be like, okay, Tyler, like, tell me about that situation. Because then they also know you care. I did a group once with somebody and it was an open group and they struggled with the names. They spent so much time worrying about the documentation that they didn't necessarily connect with anybody in the group, and they would get the names wrong sometimes. And when someone's been crying for 5 minutes about this huge loss they had and they're really upset, and then you call them the wrong name, it's not good. So write the names down. And like I said, that'll help you connect with them better too if you can occasionally like call their name. Now, another thing is to have a plan for the disruptive clients. There's always gonna be that one. There's that one person, like I said, who doesn't want to be there. Their parents made them come. They're court ordered to be there. They really don't think they need it. They thought they would try it out. They don't like it. They don't like how so-and-so's looking at them today. They don't like how you're looking at them today. Things like that. So just have a plan for the disruptive client. Decide before that even happens what you're going to do. So maybe it's somebody in the group who's disruptive in a different way. Maybe they talk too much. Maybe they're interrupting everybody. So have a couple like key phrases that you can use to redirect them. So if it's like, hey, Ashley, I really appreciate your feedback. I really want to hear what somebody else in the group thinks. They haven't really talked as much, and I want everybody to have a chance to participate today. Instead of being like, be quiet, which you wouldn't do anyway, hopefully. But you want to be able to gently give that person the cue that like, all right, you've been doing the most, so like let somebody else share. And that I think will be great for the other people in the group. Not so much for the ones who don't want to share and now you're calling them out, but hey, that's what they're there for. Like, they got to be able to open up a little bit. So know how you'll handle that stuff. All the way up to like the major disruptions of somebody being really offensive. That's where if you're virtual, be ready to exit them out and, block them from coming back into the group if that's what needs to happen. Muting them, whatever else. It's a little easier in some ways virtually because you could just like click mute and then nobody can hopefully hear them. But in person, that may mean you walking someone out of the room if they're being too disruptive. Have a system of like, hey, I'm going to give you 2 warnings, and that's something to put in the group rules. You'll get like 2 verbal warnings, and after that, 3rd strike, you're out of the group. So have, again, your plan, but know what you'll do for some of those clients that are disruptive. Some people really don't intend to be, and some do. So just kind of have all of the options available, but going over the rules will help too. Unfortunately, too, I know this has happened to me. Sometimes people in your group are creepy. So I can think of a few, thank God, like few instances, but where people have made like inappropriate comments towards me about how I look or what I'm wearing or stuff like that. And you just shut it down. Like, that's not appropriate. Don't look amused. Don't be too nice. Just, that's not appropriate. So I've even had before where the other group members kind of jumped on the person who was inappropriate, which was nice that they jumped in, but things like that can escalate really quickly. So make sure that you're handling it, even if it's really uncomfortable. So like I said earlier, have just a few key phrases, even if you have to write them down. if this happens, then this is how I'll handle it. If this happens, this is how I'll handle it. It's like a disaster plan, right? Like if a hurricane's coming, like I'm gonna make sure if the water gets shut off, I have enough water. If the power goes out, I have candles and I have batteries and food. And you kind of want to do that for this too, especially if you're more anxious. Like I said earlier too, though, make sure that you're planning for like if it goes well, like how this is gonna work for everybody and how you're gonna feel. But be ready. The next thing is like be prepared for awkward silences. Like there's going to be times, especially as a group is first forming, where you're like, so like, who wants to start us off today? And everybody's acting like they're in school and they didn't do the reading, and they're like, don't make eye contact, don't make eye contact. So that's where you may have to possibly like do a game where, somebody, there's like a ball or something you have and you pass it around. Sometimes you're like, all right, then if no one wants to be first, we're just going to go around the room and we're starting on this side, and kind of encourage people that way. You could do alphabetically. You could do, whose birthday's in January? All right, you're first, share today. You can find other little ways to be light and like fun about it. You don't want to be like, you got to share today, you're next. People will feel like cornered. And I'm sure a lot of people are anxious. I know therapists get that way too, right? If you guys have ever been in like a conference type thing, you're at a conference, you're in a meeting, you're in a training, and they're like, oh, so who has experience with this, or who wants to talk about this? Usually there's the same awkward silence for a little bit, because most people don't want to be first or be in the spotlight or, set the tone for what's going to happen next. So be ready for the awkward silences. They totally happen. Not a big deal. It should get better over time. And, maybe even have like some discussion questions ready that instead of just, especially if it's like a process group, and everybody's just expected to share and there's not a lesson plan. Think through like, okay, so tell me how the weekend was. What did you guys end up doing here on the unit? And have it be a less intimidating question than how's everyone feeling today? So, things like that. Oh, it's Christmas next month. So, what are you guys' favorite Christmas traditions? And go through that. Whatever it is, that's going to be like a light, easy icebreaker. No one, and this, you can do it if you want, but I can pretty much tell you right now, no one likes the little like two truths and a lie or like that type of stuff. Those are always awkward. They're weird. People get stressed when they know that they're the ones going to have to come up with that and share next. So I'll just do something open-ended. What's your favorite TV show? What did you watch as a kid? Little things like that are just kind of get to know yous that feel a bit safer and not so personal, and they don't require like a ton of effort from people to share. So have even some of those. If you're like, all right, I can tell you guys are not really feeling like talking today, maybe have everybody get up and stretch and move. If you're, you could do it virtually too, actually. But yeah, in person or that. So it's okay if people are kind of freaked out and quiet and silent. They'll get over it. It'll get better. The last thing is just keep your boundaries. Like, you have to practice what you're preaching. So even if you're having fun in the group, even if it's really just like everybody's getting along, it's so great, you're happy, like things are working really well, just still maintain like that certain level of professionalism and the expectations. That's why I said earlier, like take time at every group to reinforce the rules so everybody knows about them. No one forgot. Sometimes in the closed groups, how I mentioned before, I had people for like 12 weeks. Sometimes there's a level of familiarity, especially because I was with them 5 days a week, that, some of them may start asking you a lot of personal questions because you've been sitting with them, you've been hanging out with them for months now. So, just kind of maintain those boundaries. My dog agrees. But yeah, just know that like you want to still like establish that authority while also being like comfortable and approachable for the clients in the group. So, if it's a group that maybe it's closed and you had the rules, the first session, midway through, be like, hey guys, just a check-in. It's been 6 weeks of the 12. Like, we're just going to go over really quick what the group rules were, make sure everybody's still on the same page, and then let's move on and handle it that way. So when I tell you I've seen like transformative experiences in groups, it's I've seen it in every setting. I've seen it in the substance abuse teens. I've seen it in the process groups where the people in the group come together, and the ways that they bond and help each other through some of the trauma is so, so helpful. And it's so rewarding. And you're helping facilitate some of those bonds by giving them the space to talk, to share, to validate one another, validate themselves. So groups can be super helpful. Really exciting. As a therapist, I loved being able to do groups in the day and individual in the afternoon, and just kind of have that, I don't know, different level of work, different energy, different things I was doing to mix the day up. Because this can be mental health and it was kind of a lot. So it was nice to have some variety there and to get to know clients that much. That was like an intensive for me. You know, instead of seeing somebody once a week or once every other week, I was with them 3-4 hours a day, multiple times a week. And you get to really know people well. And a lot of the people in my partial hospitalization group, once they graduated, they started seeing me individually. So they were like, I want to continue the work. But now there's some stuff I didn't bring up as much or got brought up in group, and I need to work on it deeper. So it ended up being a great like referral process for me that way. But I think for you, if you're thinking of doing a group, you want to do a group, you are being forced to do a group where you're at, you know, look at all of the benefits. I acknowledged a lot of the stressful stuff today because I think that's the stuff that really stops people from doing groups or from enjoying them or makes them feel intimidated by them. So hopefully this video helped you kind of break down some of those negative things, have a plan for what those possible negative scenarios might be. But also, I hope you come away with the understanding that groups are cool. Like, there's so many good things that come from it. It's a great way to grow as a clinician. And you really build a lot of confidence. And like I said earlier, typically newer therapists get thrown into a lot of groups. You heard how many groups I did. That was within the first 4, 5, 6 years of my career. Even before I had a degree. That's a lot. So you're going to find yourself in those positions, and just understand that like you're going to grow a lot, and it's going to be in a positive way. And if you're in a position where you're feeling a little bit more insecure, use some of that in supervision. Talk to other colleagues who have done these groups. Ask what their group rules are, and if you can have a copy of them. Or if you have a co-facilitator, go over some of these things together so that you both are on the same page about what the group's going to look like and what the goals are. But it's really not that scary, I swear. Once you're in it and you're like, oh gosh, okay, I'm here, you know, and you start seeing how the group runs and you get more familiar with that role and position, you're going to start feeling more confident than you would have in a different scenario. So go do it. You'll be okay. Well, I hope this video was helpful for you. I recently started an email list. So in that list, I'm going to have different freebies, different handouts, and stuff like that. I'm going to have some information and discounts on upcoming workshops and events I'm going to be doing for therapists, especially some of you good new guys out there. And subscribe below so you can keep track of everything else that's coming down. But have a great day. Good luck. And I'll see you next episode.